Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm sitting on the bathroom floor here. It is late at night, the kids are in bed, and this is the only place that I had to film tonight. So bear with me if I look tired. It's because literally my children sucked every piece of energy I had in my body out of me today. It was a rough day. But anyway, I was feeling a little chatty and I thought it would be a good opportunity to answer a question that you guys had asked me, because on Instagram earlier this week, I shared a reel that I had come across about this woman sharing her thoughts about how she's very anti-sleepovers. And so I shared the reel too because a lot of her thoughts resonated with me. And I also fall into the camp of I don't believe in sleepovers. My kids won't be having sleepovers. We are not sleepover people. And so I thought it would be a good conversation to have. So I don't know, I'm feeling more so lately having some little mini, I don't know if you want to call them mom chats, or I don't know, on different topics, because sometimes I'll answer some of these in Q&As, but sometimes that takes up a lot of time in a Q&A. So this is a dedicated video on sleepovers and why I think it's not the smartest thing, honestly, for us to be allowing our kids to have sleepovers these days. So again, these are my thoughts, my opinions. Feel free to share yours in the comments. I'm not here to bash anyone. I'm not here to put you on blast if you fall into the camp of letting your kids have sleepovers. But these are some of the things and reasons why I just don't think that they're a good idea. I think that there used to maybe be a time back in the day where, I don't know, the world wasn't as evil, honestly, where there wasn't so much craziness in the world going on. I mean, there's always been evil. Evil has always existed. But I feel as time has progressed, the world isn't the same anymore. What you maybe could have gotten away with doing 30 years ago, we have to recognize that the world is different. So that's my starting point. My mom tells me stories, even just of, things she used to do as a teenager, riding bicycles around the neighborhood, and, nobody would really supervise her. And it's okay, you can't do that now. You'll literally get kidnapped. Not every time you go out, but crazy things happen. So the world is different. One of the reasons why I felt so convicted too in sharing this and just opening up on my thoughts. So I had shared that reel, but a couple days prior to that, I didn't know what I was watching on Instagram. And I came across a series of stories where the person that had the account, I guess, had asked her followers to share, I don't know, if they had experienced traumatic experiences at sleepovers, or, things of sexual abuse and all of that. And by the way, this video might not be the video you want to watch with your kids around, so make sure you've got headphones on. I'm talking about serious things and serious concerns about sleepovers, and a lot of them have to do with abuse and all of that, and you might not want your kids listening to this. So I should have said that at the very beginning. But so anyway, point is, she asked her followers to share stories, and I literally read through, I don't know, 15, 20 different slides of people coming forward and sharing what happened to them at sleepovers. And it was just so sad. It was so sad to see so many people's accounts of things that happened to them, unfortunately, things that were done to them by cousins, by just older kids from the neighborhood, friends, family members of friends. And it was honestly just heartbreaking to read through these stories because there were so many of them. And it's so clear that it's not a one-off case anymore. It seems to be a pattern, right? So when you start recognizing that more and more people are experiencing abuse and things that maybe you don't want your kids exposed to, we should at least have the conversation, right? Which is what I'm trying to do today. So I have a lot of concerns when it comes to having my kids sleep over anyone's house. And I mean, I grew up not going to really any sleepovers. I think I went to a handful of sleepovers with my one girlfriend, which was basically my cousin. We were that close. So my parents knew each other. We were always together. So that was the only person's house that I was able to sleep over. And then there was one time, I don't remember what grade I was in, but I was in elementary school. There was one friend that I literally begged my mom to sleep over at her house. And my mom put up a fight, and I don't know how I even won that battle, but there was one time that it happened. And then I think after that she was never again. And by the grace of God, nothing ever bad happened at a sleepover for me. So like I don't have one of these traumatic experiences, but I recognize that I was fortunate and that nothing bad ever happened to me. But I can see why, especially in today's day and age, it would just lay out a lot of the conditions that would bring about bad things happening. So concerns that I would have. First of all, like the idea of sleeping over somebody's house, like first of all, if you're even gonna entertain the idea of letting your kid sleep over at somebody's house, I mean, you should know the person, right? Like at the very least, it should be a close, friend of yours or a close family member, right? Like somebody that you have full trust in. Like let's at least start there, right? Even though we're still going to talk about how bad things can happen even in those cases. But I mean, the idea that you're just gonna like, hey, you watch my kid and I don't really know you, like I think that's dangerous. I think in a perfect world, you would want to be able to just trust everyone, right? You would want to be like, hey, this person's a good person and you should be able to trust, I should be able to trust you with my child. In a perfect world, yes. In a perfect world, there wouldn't be abusers and there wouldn't be people who do bad things. Like that wouldn't happen and we wouldn't have to have so many conversations about this. But I think we have to recognize and come to terms with the fact that this is not a perfect world. This is a very fallen, broken world that we live in right now. And so as much as you would want to give somebody the benefit of the doubt, like I think especially when it comes to your kids, you should really kind of like maybe not give the benefit of the doubt, right? Because your job, your role as your child's parent is to make sure that they're safe in so many different aspects, right? So I think that part of that comes into like when we have to make decisions like this, like are we gonna be okay with just leaving our kids at some random person's house or not? Like you don't know what goes on in that person's home. You don't know who has access to your kids if you're at a sleepover. Like you don't know the inner workings of anybody's family, right? Like let's start there too. Whether it's somebody that you really truly know or you think you know or a stranger, like at the end of the day, everybody's family dynamic looks different. You don't really know what goes on in people's houses. I mean, even something as silly like you don't know if people like walk around in their underwear. You don't know if people walk around naked. And again, if you want to walk around in your house with your own kids naked, like that's you and your family. But do I want to have my child exposed to something like that? Maybe that's not something I feel comfortable with, right? And then you, on the other side, you're like, oh, well, I don't have a problem with that. So these are things that I don't know if like maybe we don't think about or I don't know, like we don't care so much about, but it's something that maybe I'm legit crazy, right? Like maybe I'm legit crazy, my anxiety gets the best of myself, but like these are things that I think about. But anyway, let's say you do let your child sleep over at somebody's house. Like, do you know exactly who's gonna have access to that house? Is it just your child and their friend? Or does their friend also have an older brother or an older sister? Is that older brother or older sister also having a sleepover where their friends are coming over? Do you know what those kids' values are, what those kids have been raised in? Have any of those children also suffered trauma? Like the stories that I read were heartbreaking. They were heartbreaking because a lot of them you could tell, like they themselves were sharing their stories of their trauma. They were sexually abused at a sleepover. And a lot of that happened, not even necessarily by like an uncle or an older random man at the house. A lot of it happened like from like older cousins, older friends who then you ask the question like, where did they learn these things? Were they abused themselves? So they were abusees and then abusers. You know what I mean? Like were they themselves victims and then they did things to other people? Maybe they thought it was innocent. Maybe like you don't know, right? So that's one of the reasons why I just think sleepovers, like the idea of my child is going to be in a vulnerable state where they're asleep, half asleep. You're just naturally a little bit more vulnerable when you're like drifting off into sleep. I don't think I want to leave my kid that vulnerable and so out of my reach, out of my control. I don't think that's the smartest thing to do, because I know, like I'm pretty positive that anybody who sends their child to a sleepover, like you're not doing it with ill will. You're not saying, oh look, have my child so you can abuse them. Like obviously, right? Like what kind of parent would do that? But I think it just opens up more opportunities for something bad to happen. And again, you can disagree with me, but I draw a fine line at that. Like, I'm just not comfortable with that. I don't foresee me changing my mind on that. I will probably make my children very angry one day when they get to the point where they can ask about sleepovers. And God willing, no child is ever abused at a sleepover. But in addition to like physical things that can happen, there's also a lot of like exposure that can take place. Like, a lot of people have anecdotally like shared how they were first exposed to porn at a sleepover. Porn, I could do like a whole separate video on, and like my thoughts on that and the industry and how it's absolutely terrible for women and for men and for families and for children. Like, literally one of the worst things out there. But the reality is that a lot of kids are first exposed to that at some kind of sleepover at somebody else's house because somebody had access to it. So do you know exactly what your children's friends have access to? Do they have phones that they're able to sleep with? Are they able to get access to the internet while, you know, they're going off to sleep? Are they able to search websites and then show your child? Because even if you as a parent have set limits and have set things like, oh, you don't have a phone or you don't have access to a computer, what about where your children are spending their time? Whether it's a sleepover, whether it's just like going to somebody's house after school. I think that's where we have to just be a little bit smart. I think that's where we have to kind of be able to discern. I think that takes a lot of like us knowing who our kids' friends are and the parents, and it's a lot of work, but I think it is our job to stay on top of that and to be very, very vigilant of it, because I promise you that as much as you want to say, and I'm talking to myself in the future, because I know that I'm gonna have to face a lot of these things. So don't think that I'm like preaching to you. It's just my kids are not at an age yet really where we're having to worry about some of these things, because Jackson is 2 and Riley is 4. So there really isn't this dynamic of, oh, can I sleep over at my friend's house? Like, that doesn't exist yet. But I think we have to be wise, and I think that as innocent as your child may seem, or as good of a child your child may seem, like, oh, my kid would never do that, my kid would never look for that or seek that. Maybe they wouldn't, but would somebody else expose your child to it? Like, the reality is, like, if you look at the statistics, like the age that kids are exposed to sexually explicit material, it gets younger and younger. And I think that sleepovers honestly is like one of the most perfect ways for like people to have access to that, because your parents aren't awake the whole time. There's a period of time where you're not being supervised. It's like nighttime. It's like there's something about being awake alone with your friends in the middle of the night. Like, that's what these slumber parties are about, right? So I just don't think it's wise to have our kids be in that setting. I know that there are going to be people, and there are people even to this day that tell me all the time, like, you can't shelter your kid, or you can't be a helicopter parent, and you can't control what they're going to see or be exposed to. Like, you've just got to let them, figure it out. And I challenge that stance, because I really do think that we have a lot more control than we think that we do. Like, we absolutely can protect our children and shelter them to a certain extent to make sure that we keep them away from evil. Like, that's our job. We are their parents. Can we shelter them from absolutely everything? No. As much as we try, there's still going to be things that, especially as kids grow older, they're going to be exposed to. But I am all about 1,000% maintaining the innocence of my children as long as I can, allowing them to be kids, allowing them to not have to be exposed to things if there's no reason for them to be exposed to it. And so if there is any step that I can take to protect them from that, and to protect them from being in an environment that can allow for terrible things to happen to them, then I'm gonna do that. And if that makes me a helicopter parent, if that makes me a crazy control freak Latina mom, then that is what I am. Hello, my name is Kayla. Like, I have no shame in saying that, because I think it is very easy to say, like, oh, well, like, let's not worry about that, or like, my kid's a good kid, or they're gonna find out about it anyway, let them find out about it. Like, it's very easy to do that, right? Because then you don't have to fight with your kid, you don't have to tell them, no, you can't go to the sleepover, or you can have your child sleep over at somebody's house so that you're able to go out on a date night. Like, it's very convenient in a way to be able to have other people take care of your children. But I think we ought to at least discern a little bit more and be a little bit stricter about where your child sleeps over. I mean, ideally, like I said, my stance is no sleepovers. Now, the only exception being literally Mimi's house, my mom's house. Like, that's the only place where my kids are able to stay overnight without me present. That's the only place where I feel comfortable them being, only because of the relationship that I have with my parents and the amount of trust that I have. That is it. But I think that in today's day and age, it's better to err like on the side of caution. So I hope that you guys know, if there's any of you listening to this that, you know, are also no sleepover kind of parents, that you're not alone. You're not going to be the only person that has children that aren't allowed to do sleepovers. And yes, I'm sure you have people in your life too that think you're crazy or think you're overprotective, and you should be proud of that. I think that you are trying to do everything that you can to keep your children safe, and that nobody should make you feel, you know, ashamed about that or embarrassed about that or give you grief about that, honestly. And like, it's sad, honestly, that we have to have this conversation, period. It really is. It's sad that you can't just trust your neighbor or, you know, trust your kids' schoolmates and whoever, right? Like, ideally, in a perfect world, like I said, you'd be able to have slumber parties and everything is great and innocent and fun. But like, I think that's a naive stance in today's day and age. Maybe that's me being cynical, but I think the reality, like, the world has shown us lately, if you turn on the news even for like 2 seconds, like, you see that there's a lot of things that are not good that happen. And the saddest thing is that when I was reading through those accounts, and I'm sure that there are tons more accounts of people, I just went through like 15 slides and I was already like almost in tears from reading these stories. The saddest part was that it wasn't even just sleepovers. It wasn't even like, oh, I was sexually assaulted as a young person, like at a sleepover. Some of them were like in people's backyards. Like, I went to my friend's house, we were playing in the backyard, a neighborhood friend came over and told me to drop my pants. Like, that kind of thing. Like, broad daylight, I'm just playing at my friend's house. Like, I think that those are the things that should, at least, like, when you hear about those stories, you should just be like, oh wait, like, where's my child spending their time? Like, are they often going to somebody else's house? Are they often, like, do you know who your kids are spending time with? And it sucks that you have to like micromanage that. But I would rather micromanage that than to have my child exposed to something traumatic like that. And again, will you be able to control every single thing? No. But I think that, again, you try to limit certain encounters, especially when you start to kind of like, you know, if you have something in your mom gut that's telling you like, maybe that's not the right environment for my child, maybe listen to that. Because obviously your child and their safety and their innocence, that matters so much more than offending somebody or making somebody mad or having an uncomfortable conversation with your friend's mom. You know, I want my kids to play with other kids. We love doing play dates, but at least at this age, I want to be there. I want to see what's going on. I don't want my kids being alone with people that I don't know, because I don't know what people's history is. I don't know what people's inclinations are. I don't know what people feel comfortable with that I obviously, especially as a Christian, do not feel comfortable with. So that's my little chat for tonight. I really don't know that I have a whole lot more to say about that, and my leg actually fell asleep. Oh my God. Oh my God. Now you have like the tingles and it hurts. I think it's slowly coming back to life, but man, that was painful. I know that you guys have felt that. Or is there anybody that's never felt that? Is that like a thing? Like, do some people never have like your like limbs go numb? But anyway, that is my little mom talk for the day. I would love to know your thoughts. I know that the feedback that I got from sharing that was like, I got a lot of moms who are like, oh, you know, thank you for sharing that, because I thought I was the only crazy one that was like against sleepovers. So that's my message, my stance, my opinion, my beliefs. Like if you and I ever encounter each other on the street and you invite my child to a sleepover, I don't want you to be offended that I say no, because it's like across the board, you know? So let me know what you think. Let me know what your thoughts are. Anything you want to add, contribute to the conversation. Let's have a healthy, respectful conversation in the comments. I've already told you guys, if you're nasty, if you're a jerk, whatever, I delete those comments in 2 seconds because I have zero tolerance, patience for any of that. But I hope that, I don't know, maybe you got something from this conversation. At least it maybe gets you thinking about something. Again, the point is not to make you feel bad if you currently are letting your children sleep over, or if that's something that you're comfortable with. Like, first of all, if you have in the past said yes to sleepovers, you very much can like process information, and if you suddenly now become convicted that maybe you're not going to allow that anymore, you're allowed to change your mind. Like, there's a lot of things that I did in my past that I did even like a year ago that I have changed my mind on. That's part of growing and evolving and, you know, growing in your faith. Like there's a process. It's not like, oh, I did this one time and now forever I have to stick with that. Like, you can change, that's okay. And also, like, again, if you're in a situation where you truly know this person that you're leaving your children with and you feel comfortable and you are absolutely okay, you don't get any kind of like, you know, bad vibes from the situation, maybe you're just a little bit more like your spidey senses are up just in case in the future, like, you know, something were to change in that situation where now you can be like, oh, well, maybe let's, you know, think about that a little bit more. At least you're aware, at least, you know, it's something to think about. But at the end of the day, like, obviously your children are your children. If you feel comfortable with a certain setting, I'm not gonna go and drag your child out of there and be like, no, because I don't want you to have sleepovers. I don't want any kids to have sleepovers. You're not allowed to have sleepover. Like, that's for you and your family to decide, right? But then me, as a mom, like, I also get to decide that for my family. And so that's the decision that we have made, and Joe also is on board with that. So like, I'm sure I'll get comments like, oh, how does Joe feel about that? Joe absolutely feels very much the same. Him and I have had a lot of very similar conversations in terms of like access to phones and like the games that kids play on their phones, and like how we're gonna deal with social media usage once the kids are older. Like, he's very much on board, very much on making sure that our kids don't gain access to things like pornography and the chat rooms and all these secret things that kids do. Even your good kids, like good kids, still find ways to, like, you know, back end apps and chat with random people. Like, there's a lot of scary things that happen these days, and I don't think it's a bad thing to be aware of them and to talk about them and to bring awareness to them. I think it's worse to pretend that they don't happen and to like be naive and to live in this like naive bubble of like everything's okay, it's just fun. Like, I think that's more dangerous, because then like you're not aware of it, so then like you can't fight it, you can't like try to combat it. So that's where we stand on that, my friends. Just one mom to another, my thoughts, and I hope to be able to read through yours. So I love your freaking faces. Thank you for being here. Make sure to give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Let me know if you want to see more of these like mom chat videos, just like talking about like one subject. If you have any recommendations on what else to talk about, you can also leave that in the comments. But I kind of like this, to kind of just sit and chat with you guys, even if it's, you know, a couple times a month on different topics. For me, it's like a nice little venting session and a way to like connect with you guys on like these real issues. You know, I like to do the fun vlogs and like what we're doing, but these are like also important conversations to have. So that is it. I'm going to bed now. I love your faces. Thanks for being here. Subscribe if you're new, if you want to stick around, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.